Well, our lead story of the day here is the gladiator, Peter Doocy, going up and sparring with Karine Jean-Pierre regarding her old tweets. And just watch how she spins this one. If you didn't like her before, folks, you are really not going to like her now. With that being said, let's go ahead and roll into the clip here.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. A follow-up about the MAGA Republican attention. So if we're all in agreement that it is incorrect to say the 2020 election was stolen, what about the 2016 election?
Look, I'm not going to go back to where we were or what happened in 2016. We're going to focus on the here and now. We're going to focus on what's happening today, this inflection point that the president pointed out very clearly, very decisively in a few speeches about what the country needs to do at this time to bring the country together. And he believes that's where majority of Americans are when it comes to protecting our democracy, when it comes to protecting our rights, and when it comes to protecting our freedoms. That's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to focus on where we are at today.
But just in trying to understand the new attention on the MAGA Republicans, you tweeted in 2016
I knew this was
Trump
coming.
stole an election. You
I was
tweeted-
waiting, Peter, when you were going to ask me that question.
Well, great. Here we go. You tweeted Trump stole an election. You tweeted Brian Kemp stole an election. If denying election results is extreme now,
Yeah.
why wasn't
So
it then?
let's be really clear. That comparison that you made is just ridiculous. I have
How
been
is that
well,
ridiculous?
you're asking.
What? That comparison, Peter, is just ridiculous. It's just apples to oranges. There's no comparison you could possibly make there. Now when things resurface here, and they just called a bunch of you extremists a threat to democracy, a threat to the country, semi-fascist, a litany of other names. Now when it's brought on to her for doing the same thing, all of a sudden it's different. All of a sudden there's no comparison. And you got to love how she's like, oh, let's focus on the then and now. We're going to focus on right now. Even though they keep going back to January 6th, even though they can't leave Trump out of their mouths, even though they can't leave the past in the past, and they're only going to bring it up when it's convenient for them and their narrative, i.e. again, January 6th. Let's continue here.
You're asking me a question. Let me answer it.
And you said it was ridiculous.
I was talking specifically at that time of what was happening with voting rights and what was in danger of voting rights. That's what I was speaking to at the time. And here's the thing. I have said Governor Kemp won the election in Georgia. I've been clear about that. I have said President Trump won the election of 2016, and I've been clear about that. What we are talking about right now is, let's not forget what happened on January 6, 2021, when we saw an insurrection, a mob that was incited by the...
Oh, we're going to focus on the here and now, folks. We're going to focus on what's going on today. Not something that happened almost 2 years ago. You gotta love it. It wasn't even 30 seconds ago. Now she's already going back to the then and now.
The person who occupied this campus, this facility at that time, and it was an attack on our democracy. Let's not forget, people died that day. Law enforcement were attacked that day. That was the danger that we were seeing at the time. That's what the president has called out, and that's what he's going to continue to call out. So yes, when you have MAGA Republicans, a extreme part of Republicans who just deny or do not want to really say what exactly happened on that day, or say it was a protest when it clearly was not a peaceful protest. That's not what we saw on that day. Yes, the president's going to call that out.
It's amazing that literally you had an MSNBC reporter stand there and saying it's a mostly peaceful protest. All the while there's literally burning buildings behind the person. She's not going to talk about that. She's not going to talk about literally the billions of dollars that were destroyed in these businesses where literally Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Democrat Party, and the progressive left ran roughshod over these cities. You had Antifa creating autonomous zones in different cities, taking over full blocks where people are doing drugs, they're getting raped, they're looting businesses, they're destroying public and private property. We're not going to talk about any of that, but we're going to hyper focus on something that happened in the past, which a lot of people don't agree with, both Republicans, Democrats, and a majority of the country. That happened, but we're going to hyper focus on a few dozen people out of a ton of people that were outside actually peacefully protesting. We're going to hyper focus on a few of those to push a narrative that you are all somehow a threat to democracy. Just amazing how that works out, isn't it?
And here's the thing, majority of Americans agree with him. Majority of Americans agree with this president on protecting our democracy, protecting our freedom, and protecting our rights. That's what we're talking about today, and that's what the president's going to focus on. All right, we're going to have to move. We're going to have to move.
We're going to have to move because it's not convenient for me, Peter, for you to highlight my old tweets, which in a nutshell is a correlation and connection to being extremist. But she's not an extremist. She's not an extremist for calling Fox News when she was on there. I think it was on MSNBC or CNN or something like that, calling Fox News basically a racist outlet. We got a little bit of a bonus footage here of somebody calling her out once again regarding her statement on illegal immigrants not walking across the border. This is a phenomenal clip here. And Phil Wegman is in this clip, and he's sitting in front of the guy that asks the question. Watch Phil's whole demeanor, the way he looks at her. That's how you know it's a freaking bombshell of a question, just watching Phil's reaction. And I want to give us a little bit of pat on the back here at the Bald Brad Show. We've been covering Phil Wegman for a little while now. Anytime he gets a question, we're going to cover him here on the Bald Brad Show because I think he's up there with Peter Doocy and Jackie Henrich of Fox News, and I think that he doesn't get the coverage he deserves. He does a great job in reporting. We're going to continue to highlight him. And also, the man added us on Instagram, folks. So thank you, Phil, if you are watching this. You're a pleasure to talk with. You are amazing at your job, my friend. Keep up the good work. Even if she doesn't call on you like she did today, she didn't call on our man, Phil Wegman, but we'll continue to spotlight his work here on the Bald Brad Show. Focus on his reaction here, folks. It's hilarious.
Thanks, Karine. I wanted to ask you about the question about migrants, whether they have or haven't been walking across the southwest border. Senator Ted Cruz has publicly suggested that you come down to see.
Look at Phil's reaction. Tell me that's not a oh shit question right there, like him going like, oh shit, this is being asked right now. What's she gonna do? Watch Phil.
See that for
Look
yourself.
Who? Wait,
Senator Ted Cruz.
Look at the smirk on that man's face. He knows. What a question. What a question. We're gonna back it up because I interrupted a little bit, but it's the whole orchestration of what's taking place here is just great in the White House. We're gonna go back just a little bit here, folks.
Publicly suggested that you come down to see that for yourself.
Who? Wait,
Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. He's suggested that you come down and see for yourself whether migrants are actually crossing the border by foot. Is that something that you would take him up on?
So, I've been to the border. I went in 2018. I stood outside facilities where the Trump administration was separating families, tearing babies.
Oh, here we go. Tearing families apart, tearing babies out of parents' arms. But where was she under the Obama administration when it was all implemented? Where was she when Obama was doing it? Oh, it's not racist when he does it. It's not wrong when he does it. Everything, whenever a Democrat does it, it's completely fine. Everything Joe Biden's doing at the border, completely sane, makes a ton of sense. But when Trump follows the law of which he was hired to do, he was elected to do as the executive branch, all of a sudden it's wrong. All of a sudden it's terrible. It's just, like I said, it's amazing how this works out. It's amazing how whenever a different administration comes in that's the opposite party, all of a sudden it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Babies out of their mother's arms. Some of those kids still haven't been reunited with their families. And so one thing I will say is I certainly don't need lectures or invitations from Republicans about the border or border policies. And, and I certainly won't take advice on border from anyone who voted against securing record level of funding for the Department of Homeland Security. And while folks are sending invites, I'll use this opportunity to invite him or anyone else next time to vote for record funding for DHS, as President Biden has requested. So we'll move on. We'll move on.
So she answers another one of his questions that isn't as good as that one, but I just love the question of Ted Cruz going like, hey, we invite her to physically watch people walking across the border, of which, she doesn't think actually happens, but she was there in 2018, folks. She knows everything that's going on, and she's not going to be lectured by any of us, either the press or the American public, on how the border is being handled, because they think they're handling it fine, according to her, because she doesn't want to be lectured on how the Biden administration is handling it. Like you just saw there, basically it's Trump's fault, how people are being ripped apart from their parents' arms and all these other things. So, and God, I mean, Phil Wegman's reaction was freaking perfect because it sums up that question on just slapping her up right upside the head. It was phenomenal. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.